Live boxing.
So the new opponent for Anthony Joshua at the O2 on Saturday is Finland's Robert Helenius. We've heard that name for a couple of days. It has been confirmed. I'm going to talk about that and what that means for AJ and for heavyweight boxing. Plus, why not? Hey, it's a rainy day. Let's get Mike Tyson and Francis Ngannou on the pod. It's a special time, it really is, but you know that. I'm Steve Bunce, and this is 5 Live Boxing. So during a heavyweight week, you can do several things. You can wait outside a gym and hope to catch a glimpse of a heavyweight or two. You can get inside the gym, stand in the corner and hope to talk to a heavyweight or two. Or you can do the sensible thing. You can travel out to Leighton in East London in the pouring rain and go in the back room of a glorious, what might be a Turkish cafe, have something to eat and sit down with Shane McGuigan. I opted for option number 3. Shane, thanks very much for joining me. I'd like to say it's been a decently big heavyweight week. It's been a ridiculous heavyweight week. I want to ask you, Dillian Whyte's out of the fight. Adverse findings on his latest VADA drug test. He's gone. Robert Helenius has been brought in, the Finnish guy, 6'6". Let me ask you, as a trainer, manager, and a man that's completely involved with boxers of all weights and all sexes, you've got a top-of-the-bill fighter. It's a pay-per-view event. It's sold out. 7 days before the fight, you've got to find a new opponent. Do you, and I'm going to go back to my A, B, and C, do you say, forget it, it's too close to the date? And then, if you don't say forget it, how hard do you have to scrutinise that list of potential fighters?
Well, I think the fact that you've got Anthony Joshua, he's the person that's selling this fight. You know, the people are coming out there to watch him in his return to boxing. So, yes, Dillian Whyte was going to play a factor in this fight in terms of the sale.
They tango together.
Yeah, because of the sale of it. But really, you know, people are coming out to watch him. So if it had been the shoe on the other foot, it would have been very hard to have kept the fans there. So they've done the right thing, keeping the show alive. And they've got a guy that is same stance, orthodox stance, reasonably similar height. But, you know, he's a slightly more European style. But this is a showcase for Anthony Joshua. Get a knockout.
Simple as that.
You know, Dillian Whyte had vulnerabilities. He's been over and knocked out a few times, and Helenius has done the same thing. He's been over. You know, the fact that they got it wrong the last time. You know, putting him in against Franklin, a guy that's durable, never been stopped, and gave Dillian Whyte a great fight, but has a fantastic chin.
Jermaine Franklin's a good heavyweight.
He's
an old-fashioned heavyweight, Shane. He's like something from the 80s, Jermaine Franklin. Let's get that right.
Yeah, and he'll sit and wait for you
Absolutely.
to attack, and he will try and counter your attacks, but he shells up really well. It's hard to penetrate the guard. But, you know, someone like Dillian Whyte, he's always going to start the attacks. He's going to go and leave himself out there. And I think same thing with Helenius. He'll start his attacks, and that will allow someone as sharp as Anthony Joshua to counter and get the knockout.
Obviously, if you change an opponent and you go from Dillian Whyte with the rivalry with the Needle, sold out, decent sales, as we're told, very popular fight in many ways. And at short notice, you're not going to pull in one of the top two or three or four heavyweights because they're mostly assigned elsewhere. But just explain to me a couple of things. Not to me, just explain why, as a manager and promoter of AJ, if you were managing and promoting AJ, why you wouldn't accept a 6'6" southpaw, and equally explain to me why, if you're Filip Hrgovic, who's on the undercard in a fight, why he is not going to go crazy because he's in a mandatory position. Just explain to me why those two fights are not the two fights we're seeing on Saturday, or why you think they're not happening. Excuse me.
Yeah, I mean, if you're preparing for Dillian Whyte, and then you get approached with a fight like a southpaw Otto Wallin, you know, it's going to completely spin you off. Even though AJ beat him in the amateurs and he has that win, I'm sure he feels confident within it. And then obviously you've got on the alternate side, you've got Filip Hrgovic, who's mandatory for the IBF, who is a much better version of a Robert Helenius. Yeah. So much more higher risk factor. And I just think someone like AJ and his management team, you know, this is
Hrgovic's management team.
Yeah, but I mean,
Caller's not crazy.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but he might be waiting a long time because of the
man.
I mean, if I was Hrgovic's team, I'd be looking at pushing that fight because I think
for this Saturday.
Because AJ's confidence is down. Even though he was preparing for Dempsey, McKean is a southpaw. I mean, Hrgovic got a huge amateur experience, and I'm sure he'd be able to just switch himself on.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a risk factor, I think, much more on AJ's team. And this is his homecoming. This is his fight where he's going to go out and get his knockout and get his confidence back up. And I just don't think he's going to have that with either of those two opponents. And
Shane, during the last 8 or 9 years that you guys have been going, the whole, you've been promoting, you've been training fighters. I can't remember, and there's probably one that's hit me right in the face. Have you had a show collapse at a week's notice or 10 days' notice? A decent sized show. I can't. It's not a trick question. I can't remember one. I know the Carl Frampton fight when he injured it. Oh, I know he'd already left you then.
Yeah. His opponent slipped over in a shower.
Slipped over in a shower in Belfast.
Yeah, but we obviously that's 24 hours notice. You can't get an opponent at that. So
did the show go ahead then? When
no, it didn't. No.
Okay, so
that was the main event.
You've had it when you got to go to all the fighters and the fans.
I mean, I've had Ellie Scotney on the undercard of Eubank versus Conor Benn.
Oh, shoot, okay.
That one that was scheduled, and then obviously the adverse
finalist came out. That's 3 days before the fight.
And she was fuming obviously because of that. But the fact is that Eddie done put her on another show, so it didn't scupper all of her training, and she wasn't a headline. So as a headline, we've only had the one.
Okay, because it's really hard. Sometimes I've had to do a lot of explaining to people over the last couple of days who said, "Oh, Helenius, Stevie got knocked out, and his last fight wasn't his last fight. It turns out he fought in a Finnish castle on Saturday in front of 8 people." But people say, he got knocked out by Deontay Wilder in the first round. No shame in it. I think it was Deontay Wilder's 21st knockout in the first round.
Yeah.
So people do get knocked out by Deontay Wilder. And of course, we'd all like to see a different person in the opposite corner. But I think what's happened is a show's been saved. Thousands of people are going to get paid.
Yeah, and I think
security to blast after boxers.
They've put on a good show. I mean, you've got Chisora coming back against Washington, which will be a good fight. Chisora's never in a dull fight. You got Hrgovic versus an unbeaten southpaw and Dempsey McKean. So those two fights are good fights, and obviously they've taken that pay-per-view title away from it. So it's going to be just a normal show. Yeah. So they've done a fantastic job, if you ask me, to save the show. I just don't think there's. It's not going to have that glorified win. It's how do you follow Deontay Wilder not getting touched in that fight against Helenius and knocking him out with the shortest little right hand? AJ's not going to do it any better than that. So there's a kind of a no-win if you ask my opinion.
Yeah, so if Wilder had dropped him a couple of times and stopped him in 8 or 9, then AJ's got something to go for. But it's a fight where the first punch is the last punch, basically, in that fight. And it's a great shot, by the way. It's just one of those one of the sweetest punches you're going to see a heavyweight fight. But it's heavyweight fight. So we do have a show, we do have a fight. How important is it that AJ does fight this weekend, especially if he has got a Wilder fight in probably January or February now? Because my understanding is that Derek James's coach was very much like, that's it. We've prepared for one man, he's gone. Let's go back to Dallas, Miami, or wherever it is they train. That's my gut feeling. What would yours be?
I mean, mine would be like, okay, let's try and find a replacement, because
you want him to fight.
Yeah, if you look at AJ pre-Charles Martin, if this had happened to him, they would have found a replacement.
Absolutely.
And that's when he was at his best. He was in this building stage. He didn't let things consume him, and they would have just found that replacement. But now, obviously, after the Andrew Ruiz knockout, and then obviously the Usyk double loss, they're trying to. You would have thought they would be trying to sort of save their asset a little bit more for the big occasions, and they've done that's the right move. Keep him active. If he's going to go in for a Deontay Wilder fight, it also builds that hype. The fact that if he doesn't do a good job, or as good of a job as Wilder, which I don't think is physically possible, it's just going to go into the next fight against Deontay Wilder. Someone saying, all right, well, Wilder did a much better job, knocked him out unconscious. Like AJ took 5 or 6 rounds, or 4 or 5 rounds to get the job done. My money's on Wilder, so it's quite a smart move.
You might find a situation where AJ, if he were to go to distance or win, as you say, in middle to late rounds, you have a situation where AJ starts the Wilder fight, assuming it all gets made and everyone gets paid the hundreds of millions everyone's talking about, where he starts the Wilder fight as a massive underdog. Not an underdog, a massive underdog. That could be quite interesting, because that can galvanise support, being an underdog. As you know, I think that could be quite an interesting phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, I think any sort of big fight now that he's going to be in, people are always going to have question marks over him. Whether it's the Fury fight, I mean, Fury's going to obviously be a massive favourite in that. And even pre-Usyk or even pre-Andy Ruiz, I still probably would have favoured Wilder as just a massive risk and this dangerous fight. And it would have always been one like, okay, if AJ can get through the first 4 rounds without getting clipped, he's got a good chance. But those are always going to be the question marks. Woo. Then he's got knocked out by Ruiz. So I think even pre Ruiz and pre Usyk, he probably would have started that
as an underdog.
As an underdog, maybe, yeah, but definitely more so now.
With AJ, we talked there about, like if you were Hrgovic, Kalisawa and Hrgovic, it'd be a good time to get AJ because, maybe his confidence is not what it used to be. Maybe he's not where he wants to be. Maybe he doesn't even want to be in the ring. All of these questions, that's not me making statements. That's me asking questions. Where do you think AJ is? Where do you, if you had a heavyweight, would you
if I had Hrgovic, I would definitely. I mean, I think Hrgovic is a sleeping giant in the division. I really rate him. I think he carries enough power. He punches in combination. He's 6'6", smart, got a good chin, got great boxing pedigree. I think that he's where my money would be on in terms of in the next sort of couple of years, potentially even giving Usyk a hell of a fight. Stylistically, he might struggle with Fury, but with AJ, it's been well documented. His panic before the Ruiz fight out in New York, and I mean, he had so much pressure on his shoulders. I think they need to bring him back and figure out if he really wants to try and.
That was a long time ago now, deep. Shane. That's June 2019.
Yeah,
we're in August of 2023. It's not last year or the year before. It's 4 years ago. Over 4 years.
Yeah, and he's made hundreds of millions. Yeah, he's made hundreds of millions, and you're so fearless when you're on the way up. And even after he won the
and a bit skill. And a bit skill.
Yeah, you are. But also, you want to prove things. You got this chip on your shoulder, and he's just turned 34, or he's about to turn 34. I'm pretty sure. Age, yes. So heavyweights do tend to
33.
peak.
34
yeah.
Soon.
So he'll be 34 in October. Heavyweights do tend to peak later on. But it's all about the mindset. If he can try and, he's in a new environment. He's surrounding himself by a great load of fighters with Frank Martin, Errol Spence, even though he's had that fight, and then Charlo. There's some great fighters in there, and they've probably all. I mean, what it's like being around these world-class fighters. Everyone's got a defining trait. So if you're surrounded in that environment, you can only succeed. So this is going to be. He's put himself in the correct position to achieve those goals again. But once you've achieved that much success and that much money, it's very hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's the Marvin Hagler silk pajamas getting up at 6 o'clock in the morning to go out and run in the rain quote that gets misused and abused, but the essence is there. It's interesting you mentioned that whole Derek James setup and gym, because you've got a gym like that. Okay, you might not have might not have the 3 or 4 sort of unified or top champions that he's got, but you've got that same type of gym. It's a gym. It's a proper gym full of world-class fighters or guys that are about to become world-class fighters. And I know that there's a documentary, because I did something for it last year in Miami, which seems like a long time ago. Daniel Dubois in Miami last June in the rain. Seems like forever ago. That's important to you, isn't it, having that gym, not having just an individual guy, 17 people in one camp training, in isolation. It's important that you're creating a club, so to speak.
Yeah, I do my best to. And everyone has a defining trait, as we talked about.
Which is important.
Yeah, Chris Billam-Smith is such a great role model. Adam Azim's this touted superstar. And, to be able to figure out what got Chris to becoming a world champion. Caroline Dubois got her own story. Ellie Scotney's just won a world title. So, and also you got people like George Groves and Luke Campbell that will pop their head in every now and again. And you got my dad, who's a former world champion. So
is that important? Those ex-fighters?
Yeah, it's so important, because they can just share stories and they can share experiences. And I might have boxed as an amateur, but I never walked out in front of 20,000 people for a world title, and I never boxed over the amateur distance. So. Even though I've been in corners for world championship fights and unified world championship fights and stuff like that, it's it's nice for them to get that, to just to pick everyone's brains. So, and I think it's, look at Repton Amateur Club or Dale Youth when George Groves and James DeGale were there. They had loads of kids, and everyone starts to gravitate towards that sort of gym and environment. And I think Derek James has got that. Eddie Reynosa had that a few years ago, where everyone was gravitating towards it, and success breeds success.
It absolutely breeds success, and it is genuinely that simple. And it's interesting when you speak to George Groves about his two massive fights. Obviously, he had loads of big fights, but the two massive fights with Carl Froch, one massive fight in Manchester.
Wish I'd have been a part of the team then.
Well, listen, I bet you do. And obviously the one outdoors. George talks about, and their eyes glaze over when they talk about, Carl does the same thing. You talk to Carl Froch about walking out at Wembley. He doesn't take that in his stride. When he's talking, you can see him taking a breath. So you're absolutely right what you say. You could be there. You can be part of it. You can be at ringside like me, touching the ring apron. You can be in the corner like you, but we're not in the ring. And that person in the ring, who's one of the 3 people left in the ring when the Raw starts, only he or she can give off that knowledge.
Exactly. And that's his experience. That experience is, you cannot buy it.
So listen, we've sorted it out. Robert Helenius is coming in. Okay, it's not ideal. He's not ideal, but he's a big old lad, and the show's been saved. The show's been salvaged. Dillian Whyte's got to go off and do his thing, and we've still got to work out what exactly it is that Anthony Joshua's working towards. This boxing, this new style, the thinking man, the thinking heavyweight. We've seen fighters transform. Muhammad Ali's a different fighter in the 70s than he was in the 60s. Floyd Mayweather's a different fighter in the second half of his career as he was in the first half of his
Hopkins,
career.
Even Mayweather, they had
changes.
that. But then you've got on the other side, you've got the Roy Jones, where he ruled the world.
Yeah.
And then he lost that touch and he fell apart. And I think it's mentality and it's the way they fight. Are they athletic fighters? Are they defensive fighters? Is their style able to merge with age when they start to lose a little bit of that snap, lose a bit of the speed? Vulnerabilities start creeping in as you get older. Do they have that defense
physically and mentally?
Yeah, physically as well. Do they have that style that can sort of shell up and like a Jermaine Franklin? I mean, he could probably fight till he's 50s because he shells up behind the shoulder well. Yeah. AJ he's an attacking fighter, so he has to really find another dimension to how to fight.
So Derek James and AJ sat down this morning, basically, or they probably knew 24 hours ago it was going to be Robert Helenius. They pulled off their film of Big Robert, 6'6", traditional European. He's got a dangerous. He's knocked a lot of people out. He's stopped a lot of people, but he's not Dillian Whyte. What can you do in the 3 or 4 days this week when you're really just shaking out and meeting the press?
Yeah, I mean, your sparring's done, the taper has started. Heavyweights tend to taper a bit later than people making weight, so they kind of hold their energy closer to the fight. But so that will allow you to have a couple of pad sessions to really drill it. I mean, the key shot for Dillian Whyte is a left hook to the head and the left hook to the body. So their whole thing will be, letting him fall in on the right hand and then making sure that your hand's high for the left hook and don't be trading left hooks with him. But I think a left hook would be a great shot for AJ in this fight, whereas it wouldn't be a good shot for AJ against Dillian because you're just trading left hooks. Helenius throws a great one too. That's his perfect shot. So using your feet a little bit more than you would against Dillian. Dillian leaves his feet behind. He's a little bit more well schooled. But all of these things, I think, potentially working the body a little bit more, but you can't overcomplicate it.
Especially at this late stage.
And I think that's one of the things that Anthony Joshua has always really struggled with. He's always tried to overcomplicate things. I mean, he would have had good sparring. You couldn't replicate Dillian Whyte. So you might have a few sparring partners in that camp that you might be, that might have been more suited to Robert Helenius. So you've just got to look into yourself and think, all right, well, I know I've got this fight. I know I've got the ability to work on these sort of shot selection, and it's up to him to implement it.
Keep it simple, Derek James. I'm with Shane McGuigan in the back room of a Turkish restaurant in Leighton. It's pouring rain outside. It's heavyweight week. There is a fight at the weekend. Robert Helenius, the Nordic Nightmare or the Viking Nightmare. Take your pick on those headlines. I generally do. Against Anthony Joshua. We've been discussing that fight. We're going to have a short break now. When we come back, yes, it's Ngannou. It's Tyson Fury. It's Mike Tyson. And Shane McGuigan's with me.